Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review comes from 1943, and it's Jacques Tourneur's I Walked with a Zombie, produced by Val Newton. This is probably one of the more underrated, not as famous as Cat People, or Build My Gallows High, Out of the Past, or Leopard Man even, or obviously Night of the Demon. But this is just a beautiful little film set in the West Indies. And this is actually a German Blu-ray, because I had this film just recorded on a DVD off the television back in the day. So it's really good seeing this actually on Blu-ray, and it does look stunning because it has wonderful black and white cinematography. As you can see, we've got Ich wollte einen Zombie on the spines. It's actually a lovely little addition, because you also get a booklet, you get internal artwork, which is just the reversible cover without the 12 certificate. Also, the booklet is in German. It even has colour photographs. Obviously the film is in black and white. There's a nice essay on Kurt Sodermack, who wrote it, who also wrote The Wolfman as well. I Walked with a Zombie obviously sounds like one of the 50s B pictures, like I Was a Teenage Werewolf. But obviously this is from 1943. So it's a lovely German edition. And it's a lovely print. It's multi-region. It has an audio commentary by Dr. Rolf Geissen. And there's also a feature on Kurt Sodermack. Unfortunately, there's no English subtitles for the Kurt Sodermack piece. So the film is only 69 minutes, but it's one of those films that, even just being 69 minutes, it doesn't rattle along like some of them. Of course, it's well paced, but it still takes its time. You know, it doesn't careen along. Because it's 69 minutes. It's beautifully paced, beautifully crafted, as most of Tourneur's films were. The first couple of sentences is a voiceover where the female character is literally saying, I've walked with a zombie. That's not something you hear a lot, but I'll tell you why. And we see this nurse who's pretty much at a job interview, and it's for a man in the West Indies, and then it's literally just cuts to her in a boat, because again we don't need hours of backstory and how she got there. There's not many stars in it. I'm not sure you can actually call Tom Conway a star. George Sanders was busy. He's almost got George Sanders' voice down to a T. Again, I'm not actually sure who came first. I'm sure somebody in the comments will let me know. But he is playing a cad whose wife is ill, and the nurse is employed to look after her. There's some wonderful Shakespearean relationships going on, because he has a stepbrother who may have more feelings for his wife than he does, and then he starts to have feelings for the nurse, and she reciprocates, but of course he spends the first half of the film being really rude to her and telling her she should leave, and there's lots of nasty things going on. His mother works helping the locals. Again, there's a nice little moment where a young boy from the natives has a little bit of voodoo symbolism around his neck, and also a cross, a Christian cross around his neck. And she's like, well, how are you ever going to get to heaven if you still have some of this voodoo belief? The natives, unlike quite a lot of films, are actually treated with respect by Sodimac. You know, there's no stereotypical stuff that we see in some of the films of the 30s and 40s and regarding people from the West Indies or Africa. One of the maids is very articulate about what their beliefs mean and how they look at the world. Plus you have this underpinning of the people who work for the family are basically descendants of slaves, so there's this kind of atmosphere of oppression. As they say, they tend to cry when babies are born, and they tend to celebrate when people die just because they're free. Obviously they're not treated as slaves by the time this film, 1943, but obviously their ancestors, that's kind of where their lineage comes from. So you have all of that. It's a film that is dripping with atmosphere. You can almost feel the warm tropical wind in your face as the 6 and 7 foot high crops sway in the breeze. So the nurse, and there is a doctor who comes in and out, are obviously people of science, but the nurse kind of gets to the point that maybe voodoo might help break this poor woman's kind of trance. The first time she comes across the wife, it's really done absolutely beautifully. At night, and some stairs that kind of look something out of the Universal Monsters castles, and the figure of the wife is very striking, and in high definition you can see things that the studios probably wouldn't have let you see if they knew it was going to be in high definition. So she ends up going to the native village to try and see if they can cure this woman of her perhaps zombified state. And again, there's some striking images as they make their way through the fields of crops. There's obviously the famous shot of the torch along the ground until we see somebody's feet, and obviously the light goes up into their face. It's just beautifully orchestrated by Tourneur. Again, the cinematography is gorgeous, and the Blu-ray really makes it pop. It's just, again, it's a film that's only 69 minutes. It's not any longer than it needs to be, but it still has enough to build up the character stuff. You know, there's a lot of these shorter films from the 30s and 40s that just rattle along like a runaway train. This one doesn't do that, but you're still transfixed all the same. There's just fantastic imagery, and it's just really well done. And again, the ending is quite beautiful. It's poetic, and again, it's about as much about the stepbrother who kind of has feelings for the woman who is zombified, as much as the nurse and the not necessarily a plantation, I think it's a plantation owner, but also the mother has an interesting part to play in the proceedings as far as perhaps how the wife became the way she is. And again, there are questions about whether it would be better, or what would be better for the wife, to still live in this non-living state, or to perhaps bring it to a more dramatic and final ending. So there's a lot going on. Again, it is kind of overlooked just because it wasn't really available to see for so many years. Obviously Cat People is kind of shown on the television on a regular basis, but I Walked with a Zombie isn't really talked about or shown that much, but hopefully, certainly this German Blu-ray, and who knows, more Blu-ray releases to come. I'm actually surprised Cat People doesn't have a 4K. Obviously the remake by Paul Schrader has a 4K, but the original Cat People probably deserves a 4K as well. But if you haven't seen I Walked with a Zombie, or if you haven't seen it, or you've just seen it on a DVD, or in my case it was recorded off the television and burned onto a disc, this is a wonderful release that looks absolutely gorgeous, and a film well worth revisiting 80 years later now. Blimey. Time flies when you're running about crops trying to avoid zombies. So thanks very much for watching this random review of I Walked with a Zombie, which isn't as salacious as the title might suggest. It's way more poetic than that. Please let me know if you've seen it and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.